All right, Miles, listen, this is going to be such a blast. Let's start with where in the world are you sitting, Miles?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me first, Matthew. So I'm in Austin, Texas. You can see just a peek of the skyline behind me over my shoulder. But that's where I'm sitting today is in Austin. That's where I reside as well. So
So I'm going to give you a quick hint. So we were there a couple weeks ago, and I will say the best taco of my life was at one taco. I'm not going to tell you what time I had it, but it was the best taco of my life. I ended up starting with two, it turned into eight. And so, yes, for all those that go to Austin, actually, Miles, where is your favorite taco spot? Do you have one?
I don't have necessarily a favorite taco spot, but I do have a favorite Tex-Mex restaurant, which is Lupe's.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, so we finally found an actual local spot. And when I walked in,
Yeah,
they just looked and I could tell they were like, gringo, gringo. Unfortunately, I had my
right.
Spanish friend with me. Uh, I'll give you the name. I'll give you the name after the episode. But,
Yeah.
um, but listen, Miles, this is like an episode 3 years in the making. What I mean by that is I've been hearing about you for so long, and I cannot wait to finally have your time because I'd always been sitting saying, I need to steal 30 minutes from him, but damn, he's an expensive and very valuable man that it's going to be tough to get his time.
Well, I'm glad to be here. So I'm glad we made the connection. So
Absolutely. And so just honored to be here. And I think overall the theme is going to be where is the future of work with the caveat is where is the future of the independent economy? Where is it going? Because
yeah,
you have had 30 plus years at PwC, right? You're the CEO of MBO, which MBO started as my business office in what, 1997 with Gene saying, hey, we're going to go towards an independent world. And
that's right.
so no one's been closer to the changes, also the lack of speed in changes, right? Because it's not moved as fast as we thought it would. But so I just can't wait to hear you slice and dice this industry, slice and dice things that are going well, things that are not going well, hear how to really drive client relationships in this space. And
Sure.
then let me take the end to the beginning. Miles, can you tell us about this book? Can we please start by you just
Sure.
showing off about this book?
I thought we were going to save it, but that's all right. Let's get
No,
into it.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the beginning.
The book will come out either, in late in the fall or early in January. We're going to kind of depend on how we feel about the election cycle and the media, all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, the book is Freebird's Revolution, The Future of Work in the Independent Mind. And I felt compelled, to memorialize it for a few reasons. One is I set out in the book a number of trends that I've been tracking for over a decade. So they have permanency, they're not temporal, that are reshaping the business models of companies. And so those trends are, when you see them, are alive and well. But then you say, okay, fine, that's what's happening for business models for companies. And one of those is just one of those trends is the fractionalization of everything, right? And so this ties a bit to when I was at PwC and I was looking at our workforce for the consulting business. I really just laid down a very simple premise that said valuable assets are being fractionalized. And you need to look no further than the housing market that's driven the US economy for 40 years, which is we fractionalized home ownership. Because when you fractionalize an asset, you bring liquidity to that market. And I basically just said the most valuable asset by most measures of any company is their human capital. So why would we not see a fractionalization of human capital, both for the individual, their careers, and for companies, the fractionalization, if you think of a human as an asset, you fractionalize it instead of being constrained by binary contracts called employment agreements that have, much more permanency to them. So I figured that was going to happen for companies. And then it was really early because this was over a decade ago, Matthew, when I first touched on this. And we built what's called the PwC Talent Exchange. And it's an exchange because it's a trading platform for human capital, basically. And what I identified at the time is there was really talented people. They just didn't want to work for a company. Like they just wanted to be their own boss. But the problem was they didn't have access to projects. Well, obviously big consulting firms have access to all kinds of projects, great brands for doing it. And so we built the exchange. And then as we started to scale that is when I met Gene Zaino, and we went, MBO was running the back office for independent contractor compliance for us. So that takes me through the book, which is Gene's thing was my business office, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, which was helping independents that want to be entrepreneurial or stand up a business and operate a services business. I obviously knew how you go solve big enterprise problems and match that together. So that's how we got together originally. And then in the book, what I talk about, in addition to the company, is what it takes for an independent to build successful independent solo entrepreneur or small company services businesses. And then the bridge between those two is I fundamentally believe we need a change in the social contract in this country. America was built by immigrants and entrepreneurs that came, and small businesses drove the GDP of this company or of this country until big corporations started to emerge, and the big corporates pushed out the small entrepreneurs. I think we need a regeneration of the American soul in driving entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm not the only one that thinks that, because, today we have over 70 million people that have chosen to work as a freelancer in this country.
Can we, Miles, we're hitting the head. We're getting straight into it. We skipped the tell us about yourself and why. And you listeners out there, I want you to listen for a little bit of a Canadian accent, Miles. So I'm gonna let you know I picked up on a little bit of a very northern accent. But so let's straight up hit the head on what I want to call a lay of the land, and that is defining, but then also giving the who cares answer to how we define employment. And so it's pretty easy to say, hey, forever we've had full-time employment. I would argue since the 50s, we started to see external employment being just as good, if not better. But we sit in the land right now that there's this weird terminology. There's contingent talent, there's external talent, there's direct talent, there's all these different terms, right? But to me, it's kind of as simple as what are we talking about, right? Like, what is the actual work itself and how are we doing it? But so I want to give it over to you. How do you define the various models of employment, and who cares?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I'll see if I can unpack that in digestible chunks. So the first is, I view the future of work being comprised of both independent contractors as well as full-time employees. Now, if you think about it for a moment, the way I just answered that question is driven, or the center of gravity on that answer is what the legal contractual arrangement is. That's flawed. Okay. And I'm going to explain why. So if you're a full-time employee, that emerged, as you said, in the 1950s, kind of post-World War II. There was such a big demand in the United States for growth, so it emerged. So here's what's interesting. If you go back to 1980, roughly 2/3 of people that worked for private companies had a defined benefit plan in the United States. 2/3. Today, that number's 4%. So corporate America broke the promise that said, you come and work for me, and I will take care of you in some form of post-retirement benefit plan, whether it's an income stream, a medical plan, there's various versions of them. But effectively, that promise got broke, okay? Now, it may have been built originally on false premise from an economic and math perspective, but it doesn't matter. It was there. And people thought they could stay, get the golden watch, retire, and live happily ever after. Well, that's gone. Now you can say, okay, Miles, I get that, but that's not really driving it. Actually, it's driving the change in the way humans think about their loyalty to companies. Because in the United States, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you are under 45 today, you will change companies not roles, companies, every 4 years. If you're under 35, you change every 3.1 years. So anybody that thinks that, that's sitting there, that's 55 years old, and they think that the workforce of the future or the future of work is going to be this permanent workforce, they're just sadly mistaken, because everybody is running a much more agile transient workforce. Yet the contractual structures have not been modified to adjust for that changing choice that the individual wants. People want the choice to work the way they want. And so when I define it, I say, fine, we got 72 million people. That's a lot of people, okay, that are working as independent contractors today in some form. By the way, some of them also have full-time jobs, but they're also working side gigs. But what happens is they get a taste of working for themselves, and then they become full-time independents in a much more pronounced way, right? So, at MBO, which is obvious where I'm at now, we tend to cater towards the independent knowledge worker, which I think of that as people that, are making, they probably make like over $100,000 a year, right? That segment today is about 4.6 million people in the United States. That's a massive workforce in the independent knowledge worker space. Yet, what's happened with the contractual structures is they have not changed. And if anything, regulation that has come out has tried to restrict an individual's choice to contract with a company the way they want to work. So this just blows my mind. You get the right to organize, which I get. That's called labor unions, right? You get the choice to organize, but you don't get a choice to choose your contractual structure between whether you're a W-2 employee or whether you're an independent business that works with a company. Yet labor unions were created so that people could organize and do collective bargaining. Well, I'm pretty sure that I can organize in about 30 minutes on a social media platform. And again, on this point, you can look back to the last presidential election. People organized instantly when they didn't like particular candidates. I'm not being political about it. I'm just saying it demonstrates that there is the ability to organize very quickly. I don't need a labor union to do that. And so I'm not saying you get rid of labor unions. I'm just saying the way the workforce is shaping up, individuals want the choice to work the way they want contractually with companies. And companies that don't embrace that are not going to get access to the right humans. Why are they not going to get access to the right humans? Because we have a human capital scarcity issue today, not an excess of humans for jobs available. Frankly, it's that simple. Yep. And, I ask people all the time when they say, well, with AI and other technology, we're going to have all these people that don't have jobs. So that's what I call FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt that they're trying to push. So just what job class today do we have too many people for? In the United States, do we have too many waiters? Too many truck drivers? Too many pilots? Too many computer engineers? No. The best answer I got was from my daughter, and she said, well, maybe we have too many influencers. So when I shape up the workforce, I very much see that, here's the other point, I'm sorry, Matthew, that I wanted to make that I forgot in my diatribe here. But, in MBO, we've got the longest running primary research called the State of Independence of independent contractors. And we also survey full-time employees. Well, right now, 30% of the full-time workforce is saying over the next few years, they intend to become independent contractors. It's a massive amount of people that are changing. And the regulation hasn't kept up, and it needs to change. And that's part of the call that I have, when I'm doing stuff like this, but also that I lay out in the book that'll come out in the fall.
Yep. And it's interesting, Miles, there's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be before or after you, but we'll have Jonathan Wolfson, who, are you familiar with that name? So we'll have the legal and government side of this as well. And, we've yet to have someone that actually says, yep, I need to legislate against ICs, even though it's out there, right? We've yet to have any of those people actually agree to come on the podcast. They'll email us stuff, but they won't actually talk about it. It's really interesting.
Right.
But so you mentioned.
So, in my book, I said part of it is the independent mind, right? The future of work in the independent mind. Like, I just fundamentally believe people should have the right to choose their contractual structure for how they make their living.
Yeah.
Why should somebody else tell me what my contractual structure needs to be? It makes no sense.
I know. So listen, now we're going to hit in the company side, okay? So
Sure.
4.6 million people making over $100,000 as an independent contractor, right?
Yeah.
I now want to sort of get into the company side of how have you seen the company leaders embrace external independent talent? And I'll give you a little heads up. There's two directions that we're going to go. The first or the second is going to be why you call it independent rather than other terms. But before that, one of the unique vantage points that you have that nobody else has is seeing for over 20 years how companies have tried to understand, wrangle, mobilize, organize, and what you did over at PwC's Talent Exchange, literally getting in the weeds of this. But how have you seen companies' reception for this, their ability to actually mobilize? How have you seen the companies change on how they think and act when it comes to independent talent?
I'll take a couple things, maybe a couple angles on this. One is if you look at the traditional independent contracting, I'll say industry, right? That that industry, largely the company roles that were responsible for independent contractors were, and in many companies still are today, is the procurement function, because it's viewed as the purchase of an independent of a third party vendor service. And procurement functions have done a lot to really advance the use of independent contractors, but they also have a mandate, primarily, not always, but primarily to manage what the cost is and the risk is associated with independent contracting. So the mindset is, okay, if we're going to use independents, we're going to try to use them at the lowest cost possible, at the lowest risk possible. So that's a mindset. And I'm actually not being critical of them. That's the mandate. Okay. So they're doing what they were asked to do in many cases. However, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have a human capital scarcity issue. And if a company believes that either their most valuable or one of their top three most valuable assets is people, the executives need to open up and say, I need to understand where I can source the right people so that the people want to come and work at my organization as an independent. And this is the companies that get it recognize the point I'm about to make, but too many companies don't get it. And that is that the balance of power between corporates and individual humans is changing. And humans are getting more and more power because they can go work for multiple companies. So if you treat your independents poorly, or you don't pay them well, or you're too risk conservative, you're not going to get the best independents. So think of all the time and energy that has been spent on best place to work for the employees. I applaud that, like that should be done. But why is one human more valuable to you than another because they work for you under a W-2 contract versus somebody that's an independent solo entrepreneur? Again, here's, when I decided to come in, I invested in MBO and became the CEO. It'll be 4 years in July, right? I had an independent equity research firm do an analysis for me. And the question that I asked was, is there any causation or correlation between the market capitalization value of a company and their relative value of that company in their industry compared to their peers? Because I thought there would be, but I didn't know, right? So when I did that 4 years ago, they came back and told me that the top 25% valued companies that had the highest relative share of independence to full-time commanded 1,000 basis point market cap premium in the industry. We did the same analysis in September of 23, and it's now a 1,400 basis point premium. So I'm not suggesting there's causation, but I do believe there's correlation between management teams and boards that think about managing an asset light, a flexible, nimble business model, and they embed that in their human capital strategy. They get a premium. Those companies are run differently.
Can we double down on that, Miles? So that's a massive, massive, massive point. So from 1,000 to a 1,400 point difference Can we literally just double click on that aspect?
Yeah. So what happens is when you have the independence, I believe it's a mindset. Okay, and it's a mindset of how you run the business. And I believe we're going to see. Well, I think we're seeing it already, but it hasn't kind of been embraced at scale. But most companies today are operated. If you looked at the org chart is one that shows functional roles and functions, and then roles within the functions. And they say, here's your function and here's your role within the function. However, we've seen it with the advent of technology being put out at scale, that what you really do is you need to create teams and you get the right resources on the team to execute a mission or a mandate. And then you disassemble that team and you reassemble new teams for new missions. Some of those people on the new team will be the same as the other ones, others won't be. I'm not advocating that there's no full-time employees in this country. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. But what I'm saying is what you need is more specialists today relative to general managers. And that's what's going to happen in the future. So it's going to be much more of, I need teams that I can go deploy against project-based outcomes instead of I need people that fill functions.
And let's even double click. So part of what I'm hearing is, and what's funny, Miles, is I'm going to sort of give you like some of my own experiences. And
Sure.
I think part of what we're going to kind of come together and see is that, I started in a freelance environment and I then backed into full-time, that backed into, Microsoft with large enterprise. But I started as a freelancer and then I went into a big four. So I'm not going to tell you which one, but what hit me was, oh my God, I can't be ambitious here simply because there wasn't a path. Now, I'm not saying it was a bad job for me. I'm saying that as someone that really wanted to just get out and drive change, it didn't feel like the right environment compared to when I was freelance. Now, one of the big things that always hits me when talking with younger leaders is that a lot of the legacy crap that I would call kingdoming, and I've heard other people use the term as well, so it's not my term, but literally the management structure incentives are there to go get as much headcount as you possibly can, because the more headcount you have, the more you're going to get promoted and the more you're going to get a higher pay. And that just makes no sense in a freelance world where part of what you're telling me is, and what I'm hearing is, the shift is going from functional jobs to mission critical teams. So
Correct.
Putting this all together, the first thing you told me was there is a correlation related to companies that know how to use their ICs performing better, right? Saying it very, very simply. And then when we double click under that, that means, okay, these companies have gone from functional jobs to mission critical teams. Now, can we double click even more in terms of, let's try to make this as tangible as possible? Is this saying that every working team has resources for independence? Is this saying that functional heads are saying, hey, instead of going with these big agencies, we should go with just ICs? Help me understand, what does this look like in a company? And maybe PwC's talent exchange is a good place to start.
Yeah. So I'll answer this. Let's lay down or put a reminder down of the macro reality that's facing us in the U.S. workforce, which is the bond between employer and W-2 employee has been broken. That has resulted in a much more transient workforce where people will change companies every 3 to 4 years, even if they are W-2 employees, when they are W-2 employees. So it's back to the point I made a while ago. Who believes they have a permanent, stable workforce? Okay. Companies were built with functions and org models with the assumption there was going to be permanent workforce in there. So it changes your whole knowledge management strategy. It changes the skills that your full-time people need to have. So they can't just rely on functional roles and say, well, I got these roles. By the way, a lot of the functional roles from an execution, and it's probably another podcast, but with the advent and the innovation of technology that's out there today, many of the redundant recurring tasks that need to be done are automated. I don't need a human for the knowledge management. What I need is people around the company that know what's happened. So there's many companies that have independents that have worked for them for partial years for the last 20 years. Those people have knowledge of what happened in the company. And so it's the masses are going to push companies because they're not going to be able to get the good employees. I'm using that let's say good workers instead of good employees, if they don't embrace the independent workforce. They're going to get left behind. Companies will, because they won't attract the best talent as full-time employees. They might for 2 years, 3 years, get a little training, but the world is moving towards, I'm a real expert in something that I love, I have a passion for, because when you love what you do, you actually do it better. And I don't want to be a general manager. You go into most big companies, what's the career path? We're going to teach you to be a general manager. I don't want to be a general manager. I want to be a producer. I want to create value. I got passion. I got purpose. And companies that understand that are going to win the day. Companies that don't will get left behind.
Yep. Now let's double click on the I don't want to be a GM. And part of, actually, I'm going to give you two directions, Miles. So first is going to be, what does this path look like? And second is going to be, what does the existing industry look like? Because part of where you have such, I'm just going to say like a breath of fresh air that I've seen with clients is that you've been there. And so you're not coming in and saying, hey, there's this brand new thing and just trust us. You're able to say that, okay, right? There's compliance risk, there's security risk, there's privacy risk. But Miles, some of the newer platforms, right, will say, hey, just trust us. We'll have all of your tech resourcing. And the reality is you turn around, you go, no, there's a massive ecosystem. There's massive risk. So you tell me the direction, but I'm kind of actually skewing you now into how do you understand the full industry of external talent and all of the risks and steps needed to really embrace this? Because part of our listeners is they feel overwhelmed, to be honest, about they went into this thinking, wow, this is a cool new model. And now they're getting sort of beaten down by compliance risk, security, privacy risk, procurement departments, you name it.
You have an independent or contingent work industry that exists. Largely, the entities that provided that were staffing firms, provided the people. Okay, obviously there's consulting firms and stuff, but you've got staffing firms that provided people, and that's where most of the people came from. Now, most of the time, I'm generalizing, but not that far off, 85, 90+% of people that are sourced through a staffing firm are contracted under a W-2 payroll structure within the staffing firm.
Okay. And what number did you just use, Miles?
Like 90%.
That's what, okay, because I try to explain those to others where I'm like, hey, we're default full-time, and they'll go, no, but we have an external staffing resource and you go, no, but they're W-2'd under something. So
right.
Nailed it. Yep.
What has happened, well, let me stay where MBO came on the scene. When Gene came on the scene, he said, yeah, but there's many people, they don't want to be a W-2. They want to be their own business owner. That's MBO, my business office. So I'm going to enable those people to do the things that you need to do to be a legitimate, viable business so that you can be an independent business. I'm going to help them get the insurance. I'm going to help them understand their contracting structure. All the stuff you need to run a business that's like you're at scale, but you're an individual, right? So that's how he started the company. So now you kind of step back and you say, well, I can get my people from staffing firms. I can get people that are independent. And if any enterprise that is sourcing independent contractors and doesn't want them classified as W-2 if they qualify for independent, they're going to use, we're the gold standard. MBO is the gold standard on understanding how you make people truly independent people so that you comply. That's what we do. That's the bread and butter of the business. So engagement and compliance. So just kind of, you park that for a second. You say, well, then what's emerged since 2012? So in 2012, in the United States, 4% of independent workers sourced their projects on a platform. Okay, so it wasn't through a staffing firm. It was a platform, a technology-driven platform with service wrapped on it. Today, 40% of the independents have sourced work last year on a platform. So like any other industry, legacy, 20th century industry were built, there's disintermediation that is occurring through the deployment of innovation, mostly technology, but more than just technology, data and mobility and other innovations that are making it possible to source people on a platform. But here's kind of the dirty little secret from my vantage point, right? You asked for my opinion. I often say I'm often wrong, never in doubt. But um, here's the dirty little secret. If you're a mid-sized company and you're looking for a couple positions to fill, you can go fill them on a platform and not worry about how they're classified because you're not a target for the regulatory enforcement. But if you're a large company and you decide you're going to scale 30% of your workforce to be independents, you have to have industrial power classification that an MBO brings, right? And so I would submit that we are, it's dangerous to say only, okay, but we are the preeminent company that allows you to do that classification properly. And now we've become a source of talent as well. So if you're going to scale in across your company the use of independents and freelancers, you need to be riding on a platform like MBO where you get an integrated service offering. So I can find the people, I can match them to the jobs I need done, and I know that they're done in a compliant way.
And the compliance. Let me do a highlight. Okay, big highlight around this compliance, because one of the aspects I think we'll drill into it is that there is an existing EOR, AOR / compliance landscape that is kind of old, but then also new, right? And so if you look at like from VMS to MSP to now even some compliance solutions, there is a compliance solution. But part of what you're hitting on, and let me know, I might be totally wrong, but from what I see in the space is that you have platform that says platform name and then enterprise next to it, which means usually 3 layers of margin take on top of it, right? So it's, hey, we have our EOR provider, our compliance provider. You have the compliance itself, but then part of what I've seen with my own eyes from MBO is that you do kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You put the compliance in the hand of the individual independent in a way that makes both of our lives easier, because the independent is now is not dependent on the platform. They're not dependent on you, but you as the platform have an easier time with compliance because you know that individual has things like bunker for business insurance, right?
So we make it, what you're saying is we make it possible for the independent to run a compliant, independent operation.
Yes.
Okay, it's back to my business office, right? So, and then we requalify them every year to make sure they're fine and that they're doing stuff and that their contracts are such that, and look, if they're not, they either need to change or they're going to have to be classified as W-2. I mean, it's really making it possible for people to build their either solo entrepreneur or a small business. We have a number of people on our platform that are running small, anywhere from 5 to 50 person little firms. So,
which let me make sure I highlight, Miles. I'm going to use a word that I apologize is not to PwC corporate. It takes some serious balls to basically say, hey, you independents, we're going to give you the tool to disintermediate us, because technically those individuals could go, oh, thank you, MBO. I now have my bunker business insurance. I know that I'm classified. I'm going to go try to win projects on my own. Now, here's where I really want to hit on the need for a platform, because one of the number one things that I'm hearing from the newer freelancers, which are coming mostly in the fractional sector, is a general disgust for platforms. Now, I've seen this game for 10 plus years. So I've done the full circle of, oh, platforms are great. Oh, I don't need them. Oh, okay. I've done the full circle. I appreciate them. And I know that we need them. But some of the new, waves, and even I'm hearing it from the client side too, is, but why can't we work straight with the individuals? So now let me throw the question over to you. Why don't we see a world where every single enterprise is saying, yep, we'll take 1,000 plus freelancers and put them on our books? Why don't we see that world?
One reason is where it's sitting, which is it's sitting with procurement in many cases, which they've told the procurement people to manage the rate and the risk, which is what I commented on 20, 30 minutes ago, right? And they didn't view it as I need to be strategically sourcing talent that has chosen to be independent. And that's my message on there's a human capital scarcity issue in this country, not too many people to do the work that needs to be done. So as human capital scarcity becomes a bigger and bigger challenge for people, what you will see is not the people that are managing rate and risk, and not even HR functions, but the business leaders responsible for driving growth in a company say, I need people. So get me the right people. And that's many of our most successful companies, our new clients, et cetera, they understand that and they're like, you're right. I can't get the right people full time. So Miles, can you build me talent pools of 100, 1,000 people with these types of skills so that when I need them, I got the right person on demand when I need them. There was an old adage, for years that said there's three things that most people want when they're driving change. They want something better, faster, or cheaper. And you can get two of the three, but you can never get all three. Those days are gone. I can give you all three in human capital sourcing. I can do it faster, better, and cheaper than you've been doing it for the last 30, 40 years.
Now, let's dig into some of the big wins. And the reason that I want to dig into this is so as of now, what I understand is that, number one, the model of employment has changed, yet the strategy hasn't caught up. And part of that is the fact that the who, meaning it's sitting in procurement, the directives are built still based off of a 1950s HR talent world. So I understand that. A second directive that I understand is that the individuals actually doing the work, there's no slowing this down, and they are open to working on platforms, meaning from 4% to 40% now. Now, here's where I want to get really tactical in terms of what are some of the big wins that you've seen. And I'll sort of set the stage by saying one of my favorite wins right now is how Airbus can create custom demos in under a week. And Miles, I'm not going to lie, it hurts me to say this as an American, but I am praying that they take over Boeing because I'm terrified getting in a plane right now. But over to you. What have been some of the big wins that our listeners can take to their leadership, put on their slide decks, and say, listen, if we don't do this, our competitor's going to do it?
Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest, right? So a lot of people have won demonstrably in the skill cohort of using technologists, right? So that's been a huge win for projects to be able to get detailed expertise, because you don't need that expertise 24/7 for 10 years. You need it for projects. It's back to that earlier point, right? So IT has been a huge win for many, many companies. Like it's almost every company that has embraced it has benefited from IT. But where many of our clients, and I don't like to cite client names just because I don't have permission to, frankly, but it's when the shoe or the penny drops that says, oh, I should be thinking about my independence and how I use more independence to drive my growth agenda, not just manage my cost or my service delivery. And so it's the growth agenda side where the big win is starting to come for the kind of the leading edge companies that are thinking about this. So you get really talented people when all they do is what the MBO's purpose is to help people do the work they love the way they want. And when you get that mojo going between an independent and a company, and then the company starts to build the talent pool. So one of the big wins is we've been building talent pools for lots of companies. Kind of key areas that I see my clients going to now is because of the human capital scarcity issue, they recognize that they can use independence to help drive the growth agenda, not just manage the cost side. So that's what I think some of the best case studies are. I mean, the reality is it's got to be part of the whole human capital strategy, right? And so I think of that. We talk about three, I'll say pillars. One is you got to get engagement and compliance right. So in other words, you got to, whatever you got to do legally and regulatorily compliantly. We do that. Second you can optimize your cost by using more independence. We do that. We got all the models that say, here's how you can do that. We can help you do that. That's your existing cost base that you're spending. And then you got, can I optimize my workforce, that says, I'm going to optimize my workforce full and independent by getting the right mix of full-time and independent and my various business units of the company. And so that's how I think about what the companies that are really driving this forward understand, that there's all three levers of value opportunity to pull, and they're pulling them.
Perfect. Perfect. And just to summarize, Miles, so the big win, and I'm going to kind of actually pull it all around. So, summarizing everything from you, what I'm really taking away is talent's changed, yet the strategy hasn't. Come 2000, we start to see a little bit of the ripples of what's possible. When was MBO formed, Miles? Was it 97?
It was 96.
96, right? Okay. So 96, Gene says, hey, work is starting to go this way. Let me build my business office. Where Gene, you got to give him, immense credit, is Gene didn't say, okay, I'm going to sell out by creating something like, I don't know, like a freelancers union or something that's like kind of content based, right? He said, that's hey, we're going to stick to creating the software that changes work. What he realized, though, was that the actual company infrastructure layer is damn hard, which is what you're hitting on, which is the compliance, the cost, and then the full workforce optimization. And so to kind of tie this together is the big win from what you've mentioned right now, right? So sitting in 2024, we're getting out of the gates of Q1, where you're seeing companies win is focusing on the growth, not just the cost. Now, last sort of part of this is for our listeners who want to create this change, but they still feel like it's kind of an island. They have all these different terms. They know that there's already approved vendors in procurement.
Right.
What would be the advice for leaders to get started? And actually, you know what, Miles, before that, could we just do a quick sort of stakeholder map of, do you see consistent patterns of who needs to be involved, specifically who's the change maker and who are the supporters?
Yeah. So you definitely have procurement, and specifically within procurement, the contingent work category owners, right, or program owners. Very important. And by the way, many of them would like their companies to do more and different with independence, but getting the business leaders that own the P&L to get their attention is a challenge, right? So a lot of times that's where I personally come in, is helping them deliver the message to their executives, whether it's the CFO, the chief operating officer. Obviously, human capital, HR, is important. But if I have my preference, I like to see somebody who owns the P&L and the growth agenda understanding why the independent out there, i.e. the 4.6 million in my market and the 72 million in the macro market in the United States, why they are important to the strategy of growing a profitable business. And that is a quite clear and compelling discussion, when you get the time to have that discussion with them. And so, but you can't execute that with just somebody at the top understanding it. They have to then get the HR and the talent acquisition and the procurement folks and the general counsel's office, frankly, to come along and say, okay, because you actually have to operationalize it. And so, even in our company at MBO, when we're talking to big companies, we're bringing a complement of experiences and skills, because how you operate the day-to-day to get a contract signed and get somebody paid is different than the theory that says, I want to increase, I want to double the number of independents in my workforce. Those are two different discussions. We help blend those discussions together so you can actually get traction.
I love it. And now what would be, so you got 60 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
What should that individual, and I'm going to say it's a business head who has the P&L, who has the growth agenda, what should they do right now? And literally, I'm assuming all you listeners out there are always to this at the end, that you have a pen out, they have a sticky note. What should they write on their sticky note and put on their monitor so that every morning when they wake up, they have this advice from you?
Number one is they should have that sticky note that reminds them that they have a human capital scarcity issue. That's the why. Number two is they need to obtain and then promulgate education on why independents are the emerging prominence of the future of the workforce. Then they can get into whether they talk to me or they talk to others. There's lots of people that they can talk to, right? I'm just one player in the industry about, okay, what is the 12-step program to get this change driven? And as you would imagine, I do that multiple times a day with clients. And I'm happy to do it with anybody that wants to listen and understand, because there's mathematical value creation and just pure human capital reasons to do this.
I love it. And I think next time, Miles, what we're going to get into that we didn't even talk about it is the mathematical value creation of where's the data. And so as we all know from an enterprise setting, it's mostly your internal social capital, right? Like that's the realities. You need that. But then you also need a quick stat, a slide with a stat, a slide with competitor logos, and then a slide with this is how we're going to get started, and addressing all of the concerns up front, which to your point, having that mathematical value creation along with the triangle of compliance, cost, and full workforce optimization. Those are the 3 slides that every single leader needs to just drive this. And our listeners know, by the way, Miles, it is a painful game. So they are well aware of how painful this is and how long-term they have to be. So listen, Miles, most important question is going to be, where can our listeners find you and MBO?
Yeah, so they can find me and they can find MBO at MBOPartners.com. I'm also on all the major social platforms, as you might imagine, just Miles Everson. There's not a lot of us out there. And so, but MBOPartners.com, and my email and everything is there, phone number. So.
Perfect. And last thing, Miles, I'm going to, you're the only person I've ever done this before. We are going to do something called the Taco Challenge, okay? I want a bunch of leaders to reach out to you. And what is going to be the result that will get them free tacos from you? Do they have to hire their first independent? Do they have to scale up to 1,000 independents? What milestone are you going to give our audience to the point that you will give them free tacos straight from Austin?
Oh, I tell you what, and we're doing this very impromptu, folks. I would do it for the first independent they get deployed. Because look, this is about getting the flywheel moving. If you move the flywheel, things in motion stay in motion. If you set that bar too high, nobody's going to eat any tacos. And we'd love for people to be eating Austin tacos.
I love it. So free tacos for first deployed independent. All right, Miles, we are writing that down. And I wish I could say that Human Cloud, could do that, but we've hired a bunch of independents. So unfortunately,
we'll do it.
We're void. But Miles, this has been such a blast. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Yep, happy to do it. Enjoy it. So, peace.